The British Empire didn't collapse when it was weak. It started to fail when it was still the richest, most powerful nation on earth, but for the average person, life had stopped getting better. This isn't a story about a sudden, dramatic fall. It's about a quiet, creeping decline that happened while the empire was still at the very height of its power. And understanding this process is crucial, because it offers a powerful warning about what happens when a country prioritizes the appearance of strength over the well-being of its own people. Let's set the scene. Imagine the late 19th century. On paper, Britain had already won the game. It was the undisputed global superpower. The British Empire sprawled across a quarter of the world's landmass, home to a quarter of its population. The Royal Navy dominated the seas, ensuring that British ships and British goods could go anywhere, anytime. The pound sterling wasn't just a currency. It was the global currency, the bedrock of international trade. London was the financial capital of the world, the place where everything from Argentine railways to American factories got their funding. Britain's factories churned out goods for the entire planet. Its share of global GDP was immense. If you looked at any chart, any ledger, any map, the conclusion was obvious. Britain was on top, and it looked like it would stay there forever. But beneath this glittering surface of imperial grandeur, something was going wrong. A hidden shift was taking place, one that didn't show up in the grand statistics of empire. For the average person living in Britain, the engine of progress had started to sputter. After decades of rising wages and improving living standards driven by the Industrial Revolution, things began to flatten out. Wages stagnated. The cost of living, however, did not. Housing in the rapidly growing cities became more crowded and more expensive. Food prices crept up. The incredible productivity gains being made in factories and finance weren't trickling down to the workers who made them possible. The empire was getting richer, but the people living at its heart were not. The connection between national growth and personal prosperity had been damaged. For the first time in generations, a parent couldn't be sure their child would have a better life than they did. This was the first, most crucial sign of decay. So, what caused this disconnect? The answer lies in a fundamental change in how Britain made its money. This is the core lesson. Britain shifted its focus from making things to managing money. The nation that had built its wealth on industry, on textiles, coal, steel, and engineering, gradually became a nation that built its wealth on finance. It became less about the factory and more about the bank. This process is called financialization. Instead of investing in new technologies for their own industries or raising wages to create a stronger domestic market, British capital flowed overseas. It was more profitable to finance a project in another country than to upgrade a factory in Manchester. Profits, disconnected from domestic production, began to concentrate at the very top, in the hands of a small class of financiers and international investors. The real economy, the one that employs the majority of people, was slowly hollowed out. The middle class, once the backbone of the nation, found itself squeezed. Britain didn't lose its power overnight. It just changed the source of its wealth, moving it away from the hands of its own people. At the same time, the cost of maintaining this global empire was astronomical. Being the world's policeman is an expensive business. The vast administrative network required to run colonies on every continent, the massive military needed to project power and protect trade routes, it all came with a colossal price tag. Instead of confronting the internal economic problems and undertaking difficult but necessary reforms, Britain's leaders chose to pay for the empire by borrowing. They essentially mortgaged the country's future to preserve its status as a global power in the present. The national debt grew, not to invest in the future prosperity of the British people, but to maintain the increasingly hollow shell of imperial dominance. The empire was being preserved by borrowing from the future of the very citizens whose lives were already stagnating. This is why it's a myth that the British Empire suddenly collapsed. There was no single moment of implosion. The institutions remained. The government in Westminster continued to function. The pound was still a major currency. The military was still formidable. On the surface, things looked much the same. But for ordinary people, the system was failing. What they experienced wasn't a dramatic collapse. It was a slow, grinding stagnation. Opportunity faded. Social mobility seized up. The sense of a shared national project, of everyone moving forward together, was lost. The foundations of society were quietly eroding, long before the flag was lowered in the final colonies decades later. For the average person, collapse didn't feel like a bang. It felt like being stuck. It was the slow death of possibility. And this is where the story becomes a warning for today, particularly for the United States. Without alarmism or political bias, we can see some unsettling parallels. The US dollar took the place of the pound as the world's reserve currency, giving America immense economic power but also immense global responsibilities. We've seen a similar long-term shift away from a production-based economy toward one dominated by finance and services. National debt has risen to historic levels, often to fund foreign commitments and maintain global standing rather than for domestic investment. Many people feel a deep sense of economic precarity. Jobs exist, but they often feel unstable, without the benefits or security of the past. And the most familiar echo of all, for millions, the cost of essentials like housing, healthcare, and education has been rising much faster than their wages for decades. The point isn't to say that America is about to collapse. The point is that the same economic pressures and the same disconnect between national power and personal prosperity that hollowed out Britain are showing up again. The ultimate warning from Britain's story is about how we measure success. The British elite measured their success by the size of their empire, the strength of their currency, and their influence on the world stage. They ignored the hollowing out of their own society. They ignored the stagnation of wages and the decay of opportunity for their own people. They assumed the system was so strong it would eventually correct itself. They were wrong. Empires don't fail in the headlines first. They don't fail when a rival power declares war. They begin to fail when they stop working for the people who live in them. They fail when the social contract is broken. History shows us that the real danger isn't a sudden, cinematic collapse. The real danger is a slow, quiet decline where the system keeps running on paper, but stops delivering a better life for the people inside it. It's when a nation becomes unlivable long before it becomes weak. Understanding these patterns, these economic warning signs, is the first step to ensuring history doesn't repeat itself. If you want to understand these kinds of economic signals and how they might affect your life and your finances before they become a crisis, you're in the right place. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more insights on navigating our complex world.